Chapter 3. Reversionists had walked out of the concert venue and into the town that was deadly quiet and utterly dark. Every building was invisible, so William and Kenneth would walk ahead slowly with their arms stretched out to prevent them from bumping into anything. Boris, Kira, Lyra and Linus would walk behind them as they were getting their way. After a while they stopped. Kenneth said he did not feel at all tired after walking and that he felt he could go on walking forever. The others agreed with him. William said that it was like they had superhuman endurance. Linus asked if anyone was hurt during the transition into this world. They all denied being hurt. Kira said she felt better than ever physically, but emotionally, the transition had come as a shock and she was still processing their fate. William said that it was interesting that they did not feel physical pain. Linus said that Boris should try to punch Kenneth with his fist. Boris initially refused, saying that resorting to violence would not help them figure anything out. Linus said that it would help them find out their capabilities for survival. Lyra argued that if Kenneth would not get hurt from the punch, then Jacob's intuition that they are all immortal could be more probable. Linus said that it was not necessary that they were directly immortal. Boris agreed to do it and asked Kenneth if he was ready. Kenneth smiled and said that he was more than willing to be a test subject in the name of science. Boris said he would start with a light punch, and if Kenneth feels all right after that, he would do a harder punch. Boris punched Kenneth in the stomach lightly. To everyone's surprise, Boris's hand went into Kenneth's stomach. Boris pulled his hand out. He asked Kenneth if the punch had hurt him. Kenneth said that he did not feel a thing and told Boris to punch harder. Boris agreed and then prepared a harder punch. This time Kenneth closed his eyes as he was afraid that this punch might hurt. As Boris punched him very hard, his entire arm went through his stomach. With his eyes closed, Kenneth asked about when Boris was going to hit him. Boris pulled his arm out. Linus said that this was miraculous. He added that it seemed like light beings could not interact with each other physically, but only mentally. William said that he had felt the limbs of stonified people, so even thought light beings could not interact with each other physically, then maybe the ordinary matter that was frozen could do them harm. William took out his arms and walked around in circles until he could feel a wall on a building. He told Kenneth that since he was eager to bring science forward, he could do the honors of running into that wall. Boris said that Kenneth would just bounce back and hurt himself on the pavement. Kenneth agreed to the suggestion and started running towards the wall. As Boris predicted, he hit the wall and bounced off, rolling onto the pavement. He rose up unbothered, and Boris asked him if he was hurt. Kenneth said he only felt the presence of the wall and pavement, but he did not feel any pain. Linus proclaimed this as another miracle. He concluded that they were physically invulnerable. All of them were in awe over this realization. Lyra said that maybe they would spend eternity there, after all, just like Jacob had preached. Linus disagreed with Lyra's conclusion, saying that even though they were invulnerable, their bodies could still wear down in the long run. Lyra shrugged. Linus looked over at William, who was looking up in the sky at the stars. Linus asked if he noticed anything. William said that it had been a notable amount of hours after the transition had happened, and he noticed that it seemed like the stars had not moved their position in the sky. William could recognize some of the constellations, and they had not changed their position. They all looked up and agreed that the stars had staying in place. Linus concluded that it meant that even the entire Earth had frozen in place. Lyra asked if anyone could explain the silence and the darkness they were all experiencing. Boris said that since apparently all matter had frozen in place, then there was no propagation of sound through any ordinary medium. Even the air molecules in the breeze had stopped moving. Even the water molecules in the waves gushing onto the shore had stopped moving. There was silence since nothing produced sound anymore, and if there was, it could not reach them through frozen matter. Lyra asked about the darkness. William told that he had read in one of his books that light is produced when an electron transitions to a lower energy state in an atom and emits a photon which they see as light. Even the electrons must have stopped moving since photons could no longer be emitted from atoms. Lyra asked why they could see the sun for a while after the transition. William explained that since the sun was far away, its light took 8 minutes to reach them on Earth. When the universe froze, the sun stopped emitting light, and after 8 minutes it went dark. He added that the stars were much farther away, but in many years they would fade too, and by then they will be completely surrounded by darkness. Their only light they have would be each other by then. This revelation suggested to them that the stonification was a cosmic event. William had read in one of his books that atoms had charge in the nucleus and the electrons. Therefore, they would exert an electromagnetic force on other charged particles. But he also knew that light did not have charge, so he could not make sense that Kenneth would not just go through the wall as he was running into it. And further, he wondered why they all stayed on the ground and not all plunged into the center of the earth. He expressed his concerns with the group. Linus conjectured that they must have some kind of mass to interact with the environment. This mass must be very light compared to the heavy frozen mass, but it must have charge so they do not fall through other charged mass. Their mass must be what creates their light. Linus thought about William's realization, especially about them plunging to the center of the earth. Linus told everyone to jump. They did, and then asked him why he made them do that. Linus explained that even though all matter had frozen, they could still feel the force of gravity on them as they returned to the ground after jumping. Just like the electrostatic force had kept working for non-moving particles, the gravitational force did not depend on the particle's velocity. He told Kenneth to find the fire ladder of a building and climb up on the roof and jump down. Linus told him to count the seconds he climbs and also the seconds he falls. Kenneth followed his instructions without hesitation. He went on the backside of a building and climbed up the fire ladder. The others could see his luminescence shining through the building to the other side, confirming that light did not interact with immovable objects and passed right through them. They saw Kenneth on the roof looking down on them. It turned out to be a very tall building that they had chosen as his light was very dim at the top. Boris asked if they should call him down and choose another building, but Linus said that it had to be a tall one for the experiment to work. Then Kenneth took a leap of faith and plunged head first down into the pavement. He bounced off the pavement in a violent-looking scene and then landed again. After his stunt, Kenneth rose up from the ground and looked at the others. They all ran to him to check if he was injured. He said that he did not feel any pain, only the presence of the ground. Linus asked him for the numbers. He said that he did not count the time it took climbing up because he was not climbing all the time since there were landings that connected the ladders. But he counted there was 6 floors. Linus said that was all right because they could estimate each floor to be around 3 meters tall, so the building must be 18 meters tall. Kenneth said that the fall took 2 seconds. Linus calculated a gravitational acceleration of 9 meters per second squared. Linus concluded that correlated well with the gravitational acceleration that they were used to before the transition. Even though it was a bit off, then given the circumstances and the methods they had available, he concluded that the fundamental gravitational force had not changed after the transition. Lyra asked what had changed if not gravity, since all heavy matter had stopped moving. None of the others were sure or had any good guesses. Boris said that they had to find someone who could give them answers where their knowledge were insufficient. William said they had to find the science center in town, and if anyone survived there, maybe they had answers for them. Everyone agreed that it should be their next goal. None of them were sure how to navigate there in complete darkness. William looked up and pointed to the brightest star in the sky. He called it Polaris, the star above the North Pole. The others realized they could use Polaris' position as a compass marker so they could find the science center. William knew it was located to the east, so him and Boris lead the way and held their arms out to feel any hindrances. As they were walking, they met a crowd of light beings heading in the opposite direction with great speed. One of them led them, and Boris recognized that one as a person from Jacob's group. The people in the crowd asked where the Reversionists were heading. Before they had a chance to answer, the people said that the luminant priest was in the opposite direction and towards the concert garden. Kira said they had already met the luminant priest and they were not interested in his preaching. Linus said the priest hated them because they were attempting to reverse the transition. The people in the crowd got angry with them and told them that they should not try and reverse God's glorious kingdom that was perfect as it was. Boris told his group to keep walking as the crowd they had stumbled upon was lost souls. The crowd yelled and cursed at them as they walked past. They said that the Reversionists were lucky they could not be grabbed by them, since otherwise they would have been forced to submit to the glory of God's will. Lyra asked the group about what would happen if they found a solution to the reversion. She asked if they should try and convince the chosen ones to follow them. Linus said that they would be no better than them in trying to convert others into their faith. But Lyra kept pushing and asked what if they had undeniable evidence that their path was the right one and theirs the wrong one. William said that as much as they would like that, the most likely outcome was that they would get to know some theory, but they would have to apply it themselves first to see if it actually worked. Boris disagreed with William, saying that they should try and increase their group as much as they could. He said with the knowledge gained from the scientists, they could find a way to convince many souls to join them and free just as many from this hell on Earth. He said it was their duty to do whatever it takes to free themselves and others. William and Boris were still walking up front, getting the way. William focused his attention privately on Boris and told him that he was definitely going to see his son again, only that they had to be patient. Boris was irritated at William and told him that saving his son was not what drove him. Instead, it was the people that had succumbed to Jacob's grasp and were brainwashed into accepting this place as their final destination. He said he wanted to save as many as possible, but the ones who would not listen should meet their demise. William asked if that was not a bit harsh to wish for them. Boris said that there was not anything he could do to punish them or force them to listen, but he was sure that their souls would not last forever in this world. He concluded that before he returns to the ordinary world, he would convince many and take them with him. William shrugged and said that maybe he should not get his hopes up. For all they knew, it seemed like a cosmic event, and it would be very hard, if not impossible, that they could ever find a way return. Boris stopped and yelled at William that it was his idea to go to the science center, and now he suddenly does not believe in the group's cause anymore. Linus could see that they were arguing and walked up to them and tried figuring out what it was all about. Boris told Linus that William said that the reversion could be impossible. Linus said that it may be the case, but they should head to the science center anyway, since at least they would get smarter on this world. Boris called them both morons and walked to his wife Kira to talk privately. Now Linus and William were leading the way. Kenneth was walking and talking with Lyra privately. He asked her what the first thing she wanted to do when she returned to the ordinary world. She said she wanted to return to her husband and give him a big hug. Kenneth asked her about the story she told at the concert venue about her husband not understanding her love for him. She said that even though her husband would not admit it, they resonated with each other. She could feel deep in her body. She could not explain it further. Kenneth agreed that she did not need to explain it because true love needs no explanation. Kenneth looked in her eyes as she was staring into the distance, as she was imagining something. He told her that love does not always need to be rational or even reciprocated. She objected to that, saying that she was sure that her husband loved her as well. He said that he did not mean it like that, but instead that his love for her was not of the same quality as hers for him. She looked down and said that sometimes she thought of that as well, but she tried to ignore it. She looked up and said it is not his way of loving that makes her love her, but instead it is who he is, and that no one can replace him that does it. Kenneth was silent for a bit. He said to her that he understood her completely. He was just worried that she could live her life to its fullest extent with him. She looked at Kenneth and said that he should stop worrying since she was happy with her husband. He nodded and hesitatingly smiled, and they kept walking. Finally, they could see a big crowd of lights in the distance. William said that the lights must come from the science center. They started running towards the brightness. They reached the back of the crowd, and everyone was facing a man that appeared to stand up on a balcony. William asked the beings nearest to him if this was the science center. They shushed him and said that the scientists were about to make an announcement. The man on the balcony started speaking. He sympathized with the beings that had lost loved ones. He said that the scientists had been discussing the mechanisms that had changed the world and its implications. He said that it appeared to them that all forces of nature, except gravity, had weakened manifold in an instant. This had stopped fusion in the sun, making it no longer shine. Electron excitation and relaxation had also been stopped because the electrons were no longer bound to the nuclei. Matter no longer reflects light of its surface, but instead it passed straight through, making all objects invisible. A person from the crowd asked if all the forces of nature had weakened, then would the particles' momentum not cause all of them to dissipate? The scientists said that it appeared to them that at the same time all forces had weakened, all velocities had weakened just as much, which made everything static. Then a person asked why they were still around and not frozen like the others. The scientists said that it was a conundrum to them as well, but it seemed like their consciousness had transitioned to beings of very light mass to still be affected by very weak forces, and their mass had charge preventing them from falling through the earth due to repelling off charged particles in the ground, balancing with the gravitational force. As for the others that had stonified, he did not know if the selection was random or somehow deterministic. Then the scientist announced some terrible news. He said that there was multiple terrible things coming their way. Since the Earth's velocity in relation to the Sun had more or less completely halted, the Earth is not orbiting it anymore. Instead, it is falling towards it. As are all the planets in their solar system. The fall would take 2 months according to their calculations, and gravity towards the Sun would become stronger and stronger. The tidal force's difference between the ends of the Earth would become so strong that the Earth rips apart. It would be a great catastrophe, as light beings would be slung out into space due to the Earth breaking apart. But then he said the worst part in that, since gravity had not weakened then, the Earth would collapse under its own weight in a matter of days. He said even though they could survive the collapse, as there have been reports of invulnerability among them, the people that would be thrown into space would most likely be alone for millions of years, depending on the force they had been ejected with, before ending up on a new planet. The people were disappointed with the news. The scientist then added that they were not sure if the atoms that build their bodies were stable. There was a case for them being stable due to their light mass. Their particles could still bond into atom-like structures even with a weak electromagnetic force. But if they were not stable, they would all have dissipated long before them, floating in space. The people looked confused. He said that due to very weak forces, then quantum effects could cause their bodies to widen until they break apart. He said this was due to diffusion, and that there was nothing they could do to reverse it was the conditions of their world. The people looked in terror at the scientists as he spoke those final words and walked inside the center. It was like all hope was lost for them. It was shocking news to the Reversionists as well. But they all got an energy kick of it, because now more than ever did they have to find a way to reverse the transition in order to save everyone. The crowd dispersed, and the Reversionists walked into the science center. There was a group of scientists discussing the current events, and they told the Reversionists to leave. William asked them if they knew of any way to reverse the world back to before the transition. The scientists said that they had already gotten all information about their fate, and there was no scientific way to reverse it. Boris told them that their group had found out that their understanding of selfless love was a common denominator between all the light beings. The scientists dismissed it as pure speculation and said it was not a scientific premise. Boris said that it was scientific since the theory was falsifiable and could be disproven by finding someone who did not share their understanding of love, which they had yet to find. The scientists were silent and then said that they themselves shared the understanding of love. But then they added that it made no difference why they survived. Soon all who had survived will dissipate and there will be no more survivors on Earth. William suggested that maybe the stonified people might have survived in another world where all the natural forces grew stronger, instead weaker like in their world. The scientists dismissed this as preposterous. They said that only very heavy mass would remain intact in such a world. William said that the stonified people could be very heavy spiritually if they practiced selfish love. The scientists ridiculed him, saying that there was no such thing as spiritual mass. A spark in Boris' mind lit up, and he said that maybe William was on to something. The others listened. He continued saying that maybe only practicing selfless or selfish love exclusively might be too extreme, and that to escape their world, they would have to practice hate towards others to create balance. William shook his head and said that was not what he meant at all. Boris argued that all of the light beings had been too extremely good, and they should balance it with being evil. The scientists proclaimed that Boris' idea was unscientific and dangerous. Kira said that all of them were standing in the way of real reversion, and that her husband only said what was logically conclusive given their circumstances. Boris told everyone that if they really want reversion and to save themselves, they should join him, and if they did not, they would lead themselves to ultimate doom. Boris and Kira ended up leaving the center by themselves. William asked the scientists more about the alternative world where the forces had grown stronger. He asked if the velocities would have grown stronger too. The scientists responded that it was certain that they would if the other world was symmetric to theirs. They added that nothing could exceed the speed of light, so more specifically, everything would have kinetic energy added to it in opposition to their world, where kinetic energy had been removed. William asked them what would the world look like. The scientists said the world would become extremely chaotic. Due to the strong force increasing, the protons and neutrons in the atomic nuclei would be so densely packed that nothing could separate them. This would make them immune to alpha decay. Due to the weak force, increasing radioactive beta decay would happen many times faster, and almost no element would be stable. The sun, which relied on fusion to counteract gravity, would experience superfusion that released many times more energy than normally. It would explode violently, and nothing in many millions of kilometers would survive. If every star experienced the same fate, entire galaxies would be vaporized. What was left is a dense plasma of isolated particles. If any particles would create a bond, they would immediately be separated due to the immense forces at play. William then asked if something very heavy could survive. The scientists said that in theory it could, but it would need to be extremely heavy to counteract the strong forces at play. This gave William a hint that maybe Henry could have survived in that world. William had always felt that Henry did not have the same understanding of love as him, and if that really set them apart in ways of surviving, then Henry's spiritual mass could be heavy enough to survive in the alternative world. He kept these thoughts to himself, as he did not want to be ridiculed by the scientists again. William, Linus, Kenneth and Lyra left the center, and outside they saw Boris and Kira having conversations with some of the audience that had heard the scientists speak from the balcony. When Boris saw William's group coming out of the center, he announced it to his group, and they all immediately walked towards them. William tried getting a word in and wanted to say that Boris had completely misunderstood the reversion. But Boris told William to shut up as he was about to speak, and then Boris signaled a being from his group. The being stepped forward and started speaking to William's group. He told them that Boris' group had derived information about their world, and unfortunately, William's group were not allowed to get the information because it was top secret. William's group were confused, and they wanted to know why they were omitted from the discussions. The being said that they were not intelligent enough and could not handle the information they had derived. Also, their reputation was shallow, and they lacked real influence or power over anything, so telling them would not be in Boris' group's interest. He said that they had nothing in common with Boris' group, and therefore they were not included. Kenneth asked him if they only came over to tell them that they were not included in their knowledge. The being said that they wanted to also let them know that they will disintegrate and cease to exist because of their stupidity and unworthiness. All of Boris' group starting laughing mockingly at them. William frustratingly said that his group believed that there was an alternative world that was opposite to theirs, where the stonified people had survived. Boris' group laughed even louder at them and mocked them for believing in an alternative reality. Boris said that this world was all there was, and William's group would perish along with it. William and his group were shocked by these statements. Everyone went silent, and Boris was intensely staring at the person he had signaled to ridicule them. William asked if Boris was accepting something to happen. Boris laughed in William's face and told him that it was not of his ignorant concern. Boris said he would regret not joining him and added that he should enjoy his last moments in this world. He made it clear that applied to all of William's friends too. Boris turned in the opposite direction and headed with his group towards the concert venue. Kenneth was relieved that it was over and said he was grateful that Boris' group had left to go and torture others than them. Linus said that the world was going nuts and that they should be grateful that they have not fallen into any ideological trap. William agreed and said that now it was up to them to find a way to reverse the world into its original state. Lyra asked William if he really thought that the stonified people had survived in an alternative world. William answered that, even though the alternative world might not exist, had things been different, themselves might have dissipated into plasma as the scientists had described. He said they should feel grateful that they exist in their world and actually had a chance to find a way to escape it. Lyra asked what their goal should be now. Linus suggested finding more souls to join them. Kenneth agreed, but added that their goal should be to find knowledge with wiser people than them, just as they had gone to the scientists for information. William said that they had already gotten the scientific basis under their wings, so now they should look to incorporate it with spiritual knowledge. He said that they should go to the church next and find the priests to get their opinion on the matter. William remembered that the church was located to the northwest of the science center. They agreed with him and started walking. William and Linus was leading the way with their arms stretched out to avoid any obstacles. They were walking on a street when Lyra told them to stop. She bent down and felt the ground. She said that the tiling of the cobblestone reminded her of the street where she lived. She said that she needed to find her home as she had not seen her husband since she had left him at home to go to the concert. The others agreed to find the house and asked her if she could tell which one was hers just by touching it. She was sure that she could since her and her husband had a large oak tree outside in their garden. The four people went into the gardens of the houses on the street with their arms stretched out, and until after a while, Kenneth shouted that he had found the oak tree. The others rushed over, and Lyra bent down and touched the ground. She disappointingly said that there were pine cones on the ground, so Kenneth had found a spruce tree. They were in other people's garden. They continued the search, and moments later William yelled he had found it. The others rushed over, and Lyra asked if he was sure. William confirmed and told her to bend down and feel the acorns on the ground. She did, and there was. Lyra rushed to the door and realized it was shut, and she could not open it since everything was immovable to them. She remembered that they used to have the back door opened, so she ran to the back of the building, and sure enough it was open. She went inside and was excited to see her husband's face again, but could not find him anywhere. Kenneth said that maybe he had left the building. Lyra said he would not do that, and that he would wait for her to come home. Her worst fear had come to mind, and she felt her way to the living room where she held out her hands. First she felt a newspaper, then she felt the hands holding it. She gave out a loud scream. The others asked her what she had felt. She moaned that her husband was sitting in the chair and that she had felt his glasses. He had become stonified like the others. Lyra cried, although no tears was falling down her chin. William said that her husband was probably trying to find his way back to Lyra as well. Lyra looked up and asked how William knew that her husband still existed. William said that he was not sure that he did exist, but maybe they will get smarter if they continue their quest for reversion. Maybe someone can give them the answers they are looking for. Lyra said that she could not live on the hopes that she would return to her husband. She needed to either be left to mourn him or expect to see him again. Linus said that certainty was not possible for them at the given time. They were all new to their world, and so was everyone else. Kenneth told her to stay with the group since it could save her from their dark and silent world. Lyra made the decision to stay with the group, but started the process of detaching from her husband. She said that if she later found out that he was really not alive, she could not bear the grief of losing him all over again. They left the house and walked on towards the church. William and Linus was leading while Kenneth and Lyra walked behind them. Kenneth asked Lyra privately if she needed anything. Lyra answered that all she wanted was to see the light of the world again. She wanted to hear birds sing and children laugh. She wanted to see the sun rise and set. She wanted to feel the breeze of the wind and taste a strawberry. Kenneth whistled to her a little tune which comforted her greatly.